Hello, hello to the True Blue crew. Uh, we are having our monthly sew and chat, and I just wanted to say hello to everybody, whether you're joining live or catching the replay later. I know everybody's weekends are pretty crazy, and we're just going to sit and chat here, and I'm going to do some sewing. I've got my machine all set up. We had some difficulty back in March. If you look back on the live videos, you see like 3 different broadcasts for all with the same thumbnail and picture and everything because I had a lot of trouble. But I planned ahead and I got everything set up this morning, so we are good to go. No fooling. It is April 1st, April Fool's Day. I don't really like prank stuff, so I've never gotten into that kind of trickery, trying to fool my friends and family. But I know there are some people that really go all out and come up with some really clever tricks and things. So none of that going on here at True Blue Quilts. We are just getting ready for our sew day. I like to have a open forum on the first Saturday of every month, and the time frame varies, so you want to make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you can see the notifications. Hopefully my weekly reminders will pop up in the community tab. You see those posts sometimes in your feed letting you know what the topic will be a few days ahead of time. So hello, hello, everyone. As people start to trickle in, make sure you say hello in the chat, get to know your fellow quilters, let me know where you are watching and what you are working on today. Since it is the first of the month and we are doing a block of the month program here at True Blue Quilts, it's called the Little Bit Different block of the month program. And the thing that makes it different is that we are working with rectangles, tall and skinny, not the typical square quilt blocks. So all of the blocks in 2023 that I have planned are going to finish at 6 by 9 inches. So of course you could put 2 together and then you'd have 12, but it would still only be 9. So you'd need to put a 3-inch row on that, which would be fun because then you can stagger your blocks and that gives it a little bit of a new and different flavor. So what you want to do to get all the information on the little bit different block of the month is head on over to my website, and I'm going to drop it in the chat. And I'm going to send you to the blog first because that's where I have all the pattern instructions. And what I have done for April is I took one of my all-time favorite blocks and I stretched it to make that 6 by 9 rectangle. So if you've been around for a while, you know I love stars, and we are stretching the friendship star block for April. So I had a lot of fun figuring out all the measurements and everything for this, and you will find all the instructions on the website that I just put in chat. So truebluequilts.com/blog gets you to the current blog post, and it has all the instructions for the stretched star. Now, when you are working with rectangles, obviously we know how to make half square triangles, but that doesn't work for our 9-inch block. These end up being rectangles, HRTs, half rectangle triangles. Now, HRTs are one of my favorite design components. I learned, oh gosh, at least 10 years ago, how to use the angle play system, a set of templates to make these half rectangle triangles. But I know the half rectangle triangles are just, since they're kind of an odd unit, they haven't become quite mainstream yet. We're seeing more and more of that. But angle play templates are one of the things you can use. However, those are specific sizes, and I kind of design just to design, and then I have to go find the tool that matches my design. Um, Latifa Safir is another big name, much bigger than Andy here at True Blue Quilts, but she came out with an HRT ruler that includes multiple sizes, but it doesn't fit my exact size. So I just figured out how to make these half rectangle triangles just on my own with a regular ruler. So that's what I'm going to show you today. And I hope that you will have some fun. Let me explain the block and the half rectangle units, and then we'll get started sewing. So basic construction of a friendship star. It's a 9-patch block. So we've got 9 units there. We need 4 half rectangle triangles for the star points, and then you need the what I call the plain squares, the plain units there to make the corners in your background and the center from your star color. So I've got all those pre-cut at the appropriate measurement that you can find on my blog. And then we need to make our half rectangle triangles. The other thing I want you to notice with these HRTs is that we have an uphill line and we have a downhill line. So we have to be really careful when we're cutting to make sure we get our triangles going in the right direction. So take it slow, follow along, and we will have fun stretching these stars for our April block of the month. Get that out of the way. Okay, so I've got my visual aids here to explain half rectangle triangles. So we start with a rectangle, and the first thing we're going to do is we are going to cut it on the diagonal. So we're going to be working with triangle pieces. And remember, when you cut your squares, you're going to introduce some bias. So you want to be really careful not to be pulling and stretching your fabric, obviously working with bias. Oh, good. Jean made it. Yay. Hi, Jean. Welcome, welcome. We're talking about half rectangle triangles, which are a component of our block for today. So as I said, you want to pay attention to whether you're cutting an uphill diagonal or the opposite corners to make a downhill triangle. And since we're making stars, you're going to want to actually get that going that way so it makes the correct rectangle. You're going to have your star fabric and your background fabric. So you're going to take a rectangle of each color and cut it. So then you end up with 2 triangles and you pair those 2 colors together. Now, when you are working with these triangles, they go in the same direction. All you are doing is spinning that around to match it up. Okay. So we're going to take our separate triangles, make sure they're cut on the right diagonal, uphill or downhill, and pair them together with their matching color. And then to sew, you would obviously turn those right sides together, and you're going to be sewing on that diagonal line. Pay attention here. This is what your units look like when you are sewing half rectangle triangles together. You have 2 mountain peaks. Okay. If we somehow turned that and got our fabrics turned around and had matching units and sewed on that diagonal, we would end up with this kite unit. Okay. It's pretty close on this one because because of the dimensions I'm using, but if you had bigger triangles, this would be a much more pronounced wrong unit. Okay, So you do not want your fabrics matching. You want, get this kind of hard with my construction paper. You want to have mountain peaks matching, and then sew on that long diagonal. The other thing we're going to do is when we get to the trimming step, because we're going to work with oversized units. And we are, and I've just, like I said, I was making my visual aids, and you can see the tape there, that invisible tape off brand is not invisible. But I gave you oversized measurements, and then we need to trim these down to the measurement that we're using in our block. So I've got my typical ruler here. It has a 45-degree line. We don't care about the 45-degree line because these angles are not 45 degrees. That's what makes rectangles so difficult for quilters, is because that's not a standard measurement. It changes depending on how big your rectangle is. So what we're going to do is we are going to use our overall measurement and put the corner right there at the corner of our block, and then line up the, actually, let me do it. Can I do it this way? I'll just pretend like this. So I look for the measurement I'm trying to cut. Let's say I was trying to cut a, well, 2x3 unit. I need to make sure my ruler is lined up. The corner is on part of the seam, and the ending measurement is also on the seam line. You don't have a line to put from the ruler to put on top of your seam line, but you can make sure the starting and ending point hits there. And like I said, I didn't, if I have this, it works that way. I'm trying to figure out how I would place my ruler to trim this block. Okay, if I did it from the upside down ruler, then I could find my 2x3, make sure the corners are right on that seam line, and then I could trim around the excess there. So, hi, Nan, our Swedish quilter. It's always good to see the worldwide True Blue crew tuning in. So I will take some detailed pictures, do another video tutorial about trimming these blocks, because it's kind of hard to explain until you've done that. But again, we're putting the one corner of our ruler on the seam line. We're putting the other measurement that we're going for right on the seam line. So the corners of your ruler are lined up on that seam, and then you'll trim around. And with these units, you're rotated a little bit from the normal grain line, just because that's what we're dealing with. So it shouldn't give you too much of a bias problem, but I did want to warn you of that. So we are ready to get sewing to make our half rectangle units. And here is our stretched star block. So this is what we're going for. We're making these half rectangle units. And Bronnie from Australia. This really is an international group today. Welcome to the True Blue crew. We're going to be making the stretched star, and I call it stretched because the little bit different block of the month is 6x9-inch rectangular blocks instead of the traditional squares that we see with quilting. I just have to, I always do things a little bit different. I have to put my own spin on things. When I was a kid, the popular question for grade school children, what's your favorite animal? Let's collect, kitty cats, dogs, whatever. I had to be a little bit different. And so I intentionally picked a giraffe as my favorite animal. And so now I've got a collection of giraffes all over my house, the wooden statues, ceramic, all sorts of different giraffes. And I need to get quilting some giraffes here too. So long-standing efforts to be a little bit different. So we're doing that with 6x9 blocks. We're making the star. So as we get started here, I've picked out a bunch of different blue and yellows. I'm going to use blue as my background and yellow as my stars. So I will get those set up here. Remember, the first thing we need to do is cut on the diagonal. And I need 2 uphill and 2 downhill. So I've got, I'm going to make 2 blocks of each color combination. So I'm going to take 2 blocks and make them uphill cuts and 2 blocks and make them downhill cuts. And I'm just going corner to corner on that. Like I said, I'm using oversized pieces of fabric, and those, hang on, we're going to move just a little bit. All the measurements for the fabric and everything is on my blog, truebluequilts.com/blog. Okay, so I'm doing my downhill first. And then I'm going to go back and do my uphill cuts. And I wish I had a really fancy, permanent setup with a video camera on a track system, remote control. And, it would be even more awesome if I had a film crew to back me up for all of this. But, we can make do. So I've cut my uphill and my downhill from my stacks of fabric, and now I'm going to pair them together. I'm going to rotate these around, so I've got a yellow and blue for each one. And I have to take a minute to look at the chat. Ooh, a zebra. Nan says her favorite animal is a zebra because I was mentioning giraffes are my favorite. I have a friend here who lives about an hour away from me on some kind of urban farm property. You can get zoned for horses and things like that. And I went over to visit her house. Someone on her street has a zebra in, Arizona, USA. It's just standing out there in the field grazing. It was so cool. No zebras in Sweden. Well, hopefully you can get to a zoo and see those zebras. It's really fun to see those animals. And luckily here in Phoenix, we have a wonderful African savanna area in our zoo. So it's not like you see these majestic animals just in one tiny enclosure. They've got some really nice space. So it's always fun to go out there and feed the giraffes and see the zebras and the lions and tigers and all the fun animals. So as I said, I cut my my fabrics, and I am rotating those so that they work like this. One little tip, I love batik fabric just because it's, gorgeous, and I love the colors and the designs and everything you get with that kind of wax dyeing. But the great thing about batiks is that it is almost impossible to tell a right side from a wrong side. And so when you're working with something like half rectangle triangles and trying to make sure that you cut the correct direction, with batiks, it doesn't matter because you can just flip it over. So I've got my uphills and my downhills like that. And now I am going to, and we've got another comment in the chat from Bunny Nut. And she says it's pretty obvious, or pretty obvious what the favorite animal is there. So yes, I'm going to guess a rabbit. Bunny nut. My husband had rabbits when he was a kid, so they seem like they would be fun pets, and so cute. Especially this time of year with Easter coming up, we see bunnies and springtime running everywhere. And again, here in the Phoenix area, with a lot of desert landscape, we do get bunnies in the neighborhood, and they are very fun. But I have cats, so I have to be very careful because they like to go chase those bunnies, which doesn't always turn out so well. But we protect the local wildlife and keep the cats indoors. Okay, so as I said, we're going to put our right sides together, and we are going to look for those mountain peaks. We do not match up the triangles when we're sewing. We want them to, it looks wrong, but it turns out with our half rectangle triangles. I'm going to match up those and start sewing. And you need 2 of each direction for the stretched star block, but I am making 2 blocks, so I'm going to do 4 of each direction, the uphill and the downhill. Okay, I got all my uphill triangles done. I'm second guessing myself, so I have to see. Because I didn't. No, that should. I was afraid I hadn't laid it out with the background in the same position, but we should be fine. That same problem of doing math in public sometimes, that you're presenting to someone and all of it, you've done all the math, you've set everything up correctly, and then all of a sudden something looks wrong and you're stumbling and stuttering in front of an audience, which is never comfortable. Oh, Jean's favorite animal is a moose. That's fun. And we're discussing time differences. We have 6 p.m. in Sweden, and it's approaching 9:30 in the morning here in the Western United States, and I would imagine it's already Sunday in Australia, 14 or 15 hours ahead of where I am. So, middle of the night. Holy cow. That's dedication, Brana. I've always wanted to visit Australia. Bucket list item. just sewing my downhill. And as I've pointed out, I'm looking for those two mountain peaks of my fabric so that I can sew along the diagonal of my half rectangle triangle. I mentioned earlier that I like to design with half rectangle triangles, and you can go back through the True Blue Quilts channel and find the Meteor quilt along that I filmed a few years ago. I've got a whole collection of patterns using half rectangle triangles with the Angle Play brand name, because Angle Play is a set of templates that help you get perfect half rectangle triangle units. And so I designed several quilts around that pattern that you can find in my shop. Oh yes, Bonna, 3 a.m. here in Australia. We've got quite a night owl. Thank you for getting up or arranging your schedule. You know, perhaps you are in a career field that requires overnight hours, and we thank you for spending some time with us. I'm hoping it's not insomnia that's keeping you awake. Okay, so we've got all our half rectangle triangles done, and I've got my great little blade saver trimmer here to use my when your rotary cutter blades are dull for cutting fabric, put them in this handy little unit and it becomes a useful tool for chain piecing, to just snip your threads. Because I know some people do that webbing technique where they keep everything sewn together from a chain and then add the next piece. I don't like sewing connected units through my machine, just kind of a personal habit that I found I don't enjoy. So I don't use that webbing technique. And when I am on a live stream, I do not go to my ironing station. So you won't see me do anything other than finger press my units. But when I am working with half rectangle triangles, I press my seams open. This just reduces that bulk at those top corners. I know there's a lot of controversy about pressing, whether you want seams open or pressed to the dark. I just find that pressing open for half rectangle triangles is always a good option. So I'm going to recommend that. And we're not going to worry about our dog ears because those will be trimmed away. So like I said, I am finger pressing, and I just keep my fingernails just a little bit long. I am not into the whole beauty routine, so the nails are never painted, but they work for this. I always mean to get one of those pressing wooden roller things to help me out, but they don't seem to have them, or I forget to look when I am at my local quilt shop. So I need to put that on my standard list. Always a good idea to use the notes function on your phone. When you see something that you think you just need to have, just keep a running list, and then you always have it with you, since we don't go anywhere without our phones these days. Okay, and one more. as I said, I need to get a better camera set up so I can take the overhead shots and show you how I am lining the ruler up on this. Remember, I said we're going to put the corners of our ruler. I'm using a 6.5-inch square. I need to trim these down to 2.5 by 3.5. So I'm going to put my ruler, obviously one corner on the seam line, and then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to need to move this sticker. Well, actually, I can use. I want the diagonal to be visible in my finished block. So I'm going to come in here to the 1/4-inch mark and just the 1/4 inch past the 2x3 intersection. And if you have washi tape, that would be or masking tape, painter's tape, some kind of tape, or even a Sharpie to mark your ruler when you are doing this trimming step. It will help you keep everything lined up. So like I said, I'm going to start a 1/4 inch in and I'm going to go a 1/4 inch past. Because of seam allowances, that will give me the dimensions I need on my my block. And when I get it lined up so that those two spots are, and I'm going to try and do this without dropping everything. This is about what the ruler looks like. Like I said, it goes a little bit off grain when you are. I'm trying to get that corner of the ruler on the seam line, and just down here I want to keep that on this diagonal seam line so that diagonal goes straight through my finished block. So that's what I need to do next, is to trim up these blocks. So let me go back to takes a little bit of concentration here because I want my overall unit to be 2.5 by 3.5, and I want that diagonal to hit a 1/4 inch in. So I'm going to I'll show you my cutouts in a minute. I'll spin that around and put that edge on the 2.5 by 3.5. Okay, so I've got my half rectangle triangle that's got that nice straight seam, and there is the trimming that I did, and you can see that rectangle, if I line that back up, my rectangle was just off grain a little bit. It doesn't line up perfectly because we were more focused on keeping that diagonal through the center of our block. And as I said, I gave you oversized measurements. So if you decide you don't want to waste that much fabric, you can get your starting rectangle closer to the finished measurements, and be really careful trimming up there. But that's how I make half rectangle triangles with a regular quilting ruler. There are specialty rulers out there. So if you have the means and the desire to do that, then your money is your money. So we'll let you do that. Again, I'm trying to get my units 2.5 by 3.5. I have quite an extensive stash of fabric, so I don't mind what may seem as wasting a little bit. Okay, let's see, those are. I'm just trying to make sure I have my uphills and downhills in place so that I can make a block here while we're all together. So I thank you guys for joining me as we are making the stretched star block. And this is the part that it's hard to narrate every little thing I am doing as I'm bent over cutting here. I'm lining up my ruler on my diagonals and trimming my half rectangle blocks. So we need 2 uphill blocks and 2 downhill blocks. Please let me know if that explanation made sense of how to position your ruler to make your uphill and downhill. Everybody see how those triangles are mirror images of each other? So we have our downhill block, uphill block. And you can see there'd be no way to just flip that. So Bronwyn, have a good evening. Thank you for joining us. And Nan is out with her dog for a few minutes. So thank you for being here. Come back when you can. So please let me know if those instructions make sense. If you're sewing along with me, if you take a look at the pattern over the next few weeks, it's on my blog. I'll drop the link again. I always welcome feedback on my patterns. So I do need to take a look at February's block. A friend of mine in the local area said she had some trouble with that one. So I'm always going back to adjust and update. So do not feel bad if something doesn't make sense. Please don't be frustrated. Please reach out and I will try to help you. So the stretched star block is on my blog today. And you can find it there at truebluequilts.com. Mama Hardin, welcome. Good to see you. Welcome to the True Blue Crew. We hang out on the first Saturday of every month. And, excuse me, I dropped my block on the floor. This month we're making the stretched star. I just spent some time making the half rectangle triangles. And you can see we have some that go downhill and some that go uphill. So I need to position my blocks now for that star. So let me set that aside. And it just goes together as a 9 patch. Let me find my other pile of pre-cut squares. And I'll try to do this. I have a felt board somewhere, but it's hiding from me at the moment. So we'll try to do it on my ruler board without it falling all over the place. Okay. So I want this to match the square that I've already made so that I can put these all together in a finished quilt. And I want my stars points to spin the same direction. I could put my downhill block on the top and bottom, but you can tell that that would spin your star in the other direction, and that would throw some people off if you're really OCD about things. It can create a little bit of a jarring effect in your finished quilt. I thought I had an example of pinwheels that went different directions in a quilt, and it looks like a mistake, and we don't want that. So I want my top square to go, I'm looking at it and it's going downhill. So I need to make sure that I get those two positions in the correct place. It's not right or wrong. It's just how you set up your blocks. And then obviously your long yellow has to touch the long yellow there to make that line up. And then you put your background pieces in the corners. And we have our stretched star. So I can't tilt that too much because all my pieces will slide right off. So we will get sewing with that. I haven't trimmed the other blocks, so I will set those aside. So you need 2 background squares and 2 star fabric squares to make the 4 half rectangle triangle units. And then you need 1 star square and 4 background squares to complete the block because it is a 9 patch. So we're just going to sew those rows together. And all the measurements are in the free pattern, which is on my blog. So grab that. I spent a lot of time talking about how we cut the half rectangle triangles. So if you came in late, save this video to your watch later so that you can come back and catch that explanation. We are putting together the stretched star for the little bit different block of the month. And I have gone kind of crazy. I love each of these individual blocks so much that I just want to make a whole quilt from each block. So I'm doing that. I have designed a pattern that features each individual block. So you can sew along with me, make one of each block, set those aside, and then at the end of the year, you can make a sampler quilt. Or you can go crazy like I am and purchase the pattern that features just one of the blocks. So I invite you to take a look at all the little bit different quilt patterns that I have available at True Blue Quilts. Finishing my rows here for the stretched star. The friendship star has always been one of my favorites. I love star blocks. And in fact, I am putting together a new trunk show presentation all about star quilt blocks and star patterns. So if you have a guild that is looking for a guest speaker, I am happy to share that. Over a Zoom session is the most common way, but I do speak in person to guilds as well. And I am just pressing to the solid squares. So anytime I have a triangle unit, I try to press away from those units. And here is our the first two rows. We use our uphill, our whichever direction you use. I chose my downhill block. I'm putting the downhill block in the top and bottom row, and then my uphill block goes in the horizontal middle row. And of course, it looks mirror image on the camera, but that's how that works. So yes, I do have a mix of pressing. I've pressed to one side on the rows and the triangles were pressed open. So, you know, you have to use the method that works for you. And for the whatever, you know, I'm sure people are frustrated when they ask a question and the answer is, it depends. But it really does. You need to use the method that gets you the best results for the technique that you're trying to do. A friend of mine just did a video about 3 different ways to make half square triangles. So you've got your 2 at a time method. She can make 4 at a time. She can make 8 at a time, but they each have little variations in construction, and you need to know what the pros and cons are of each one. Oh, great, Mama Harden. Yes, stay on the live with us, and then you can catch up. After I get this block done, I'll repeat the process for the other blocks so you can see what's going on. When I'm sewing my 9 patch, I do pin right along those seam lines to make sure my intersections are as accurate as possible. I try not to say perfect points because I'm hardly ever perfect, but it does improve the accuracy when you pin those intersections. Okay, and then I need a leader ender unit because I need the piece that's under my... So I keep all my little trimmings of triangles so that I can make hourglass units. And that's what I have been sewing in between other things. So I need to dig into the bucket of hourglass leader ender stuff and, you know, put it all together. I tend to just grab and I get some pretty wild, ugly combinations. So we'll see how that comes out. And then I'm adding my last row on my on my 9 patch for the stretched star. And if you make some of these blocks, I definitely want to see. So use hashtag True Blue Quilts and hashtag Stretch Star, hashtag Little Bit Different. All of those keywords will let me know. Or you can just email me directly to let me know that you have made one of my blocks. So I've got my little leader enders that I need to match up and finish sewing. Okay, there we have another stretched star for our little bit different block of the month. So throughout 2023, our blocks are going to be 6 by 9. And I took the classic friendship star, made it fit in our 6 by 9 block size. And I'm just going to go to town because I have a new quilt pattern called Clusters that features this friendship star in the stretched layout, the stretched star. So you can look for Clusters, the new pattern. It is on sale at half price for the month of April, if you'd like to sew that along with me. And so here is our first block, all complete. You can find the instructions at truebluequilts.com. I am making 2 of each colorway. So I've paired that fun. This one was a sunflower batik in yellow and then the blue swirls as my first color combination. And I'm trying to get in between those pieces of fabric so I can press my seam open. And then we will cut our half rectangle triangles for the second block. So I've given you oversized fabric requirements to make this half rectangle triangle unit. We are trimming them, and there are some specialty rulers out there to make half rectangle triangles, but I'm trying to make it work with a regular ruler so that any quilter can successfully make this block. Specialty tools always give you accurate results and generally save time. So if you can afford to purchase those tools like the Latifa Safir Herty, HRTY, Herty ruler for half rectangle triangles, or the Angle Play template system, those are great options, but we can make half rectangle triangles with standard rulers. You just have to know what point on your ruler you are looking at, because we need to connect the corner of our ruler and our trimming line along that diagonal. So I've given you oversized blocks, and you're going to eyeball where that, how did I do this before? Oh, I can just do that. Where your line is. And with half rectangle triangles, since that diagonal line doesn't fit exactly, this is what I'm doing. I've lined up one marking here and the other marking down here so that the 2 markings that I need to trim on my ruler are lined right up on that diagonal. So it hits exactly where I need to trim. Now you can see that I've been very generous in my fabric requirements, and we're a little bit off grain here. So it may seem that you're making wonky cuts, but we're going to line that up, and once we get everything sewn together, that little bit of off grain is not going to ruin our quilt. And I've got a big enough fabric stash that I can handle a little bit of waste. But if you're being more frugal, then you may want to cut down the size pieces you're working by 1/2 inch or so, because we do, we've got a good 1/4 inch extra to almost a 1/2 inch extra of fabric all around, just because I always like to make things bigger and then be super accurate when I cut them down. So hopefully that explanation of how to place the ruler markings makes sense. I will take some more photos with my tripod from above so that you can see exactly what we are doing. If you have some washi tape or painter's tape sitting around, you can mark, you can lay that piece of tape to outline the dimensions that you're looking for, and that way you don't have to think so much about exactly where your ruler position is, because it is highlighted there for you. I'm laying those corners of my ruler right on the seam line at the start and the finish so that I know that my diagonal of my finished block will go right through the center of my unit, and I won't have any chopped off points is the goal. You want your diagonal to hit right in the corner of that block. Oh, one more. So I'm just putting my finger on the measurement that I need, and that way I can position my ruler correctly. So I need that 2.5 by 3.5 mark to go right on the diagonal. What's that one got? Oh, because I wasn't measuring correctly. I was on my 3 3/4 line, which is not the measurement I need. Double check your measurements. Make sure you've got everything to the required size. And now that I have my half rectangle units trimmed, I can lay those out. You've got uphills and downhills. So these two triangles match. So they are going to, these are my side triangles. I'm comparing to the block that I just finished, so everything matches. I tend to put my top row with my downhill line. So I will, and then it turns 180 when you lay out your final block. And then I take my star fabric and put that in the center, my background fabrics, the blue sky behind our shining stars, and we lay out our 9-patch block. So the top and the bottom blocks have the same diagonal, whether that's uphill or downhill, just keep it the same. And then the opposite ones go on the middle row. And you are always sewing yellow to yellow, star to star fabric, or background to background, vice versa. Okay, ready to sew. I said yellow to yellow, and here I am, the bottom row. My yellow is going to my background fabric. How funny. But we know we have our block laid out correctly, so you can just pick up the pieces and sew with confidence if you have done that block layout. And then I am finger pressing to my solid fabric away from the triangles so that that will lay nicely. And then I can add that third piece to each row. I've got my top row and my middle row done. So those are ready to come together. We've got our middle row. And the thing I always remember about sewing my friendship star is that we get these parallelograms. That helps you make sure you've got your triangles in the correct orientation when you see those parallelograms. And I was a geometry teacher for many years when I taught high school math. So using those correct terms is always ingrained in me. So we've got our parallelogram and then we've got our triangle going that direction for the top of our block. And I always like to pin my intersection when I am sewing the rows together. How is everybody doing in the True Blue crew? I want to thank you for spending part of your Saturday with me. I'm here live on the first Saturday of every month for a sew and chat. And you want to subscribe to the channel so that you get those notifications. And a few days ahead of time, I try to put up a post in your feed. So if you're subscribed to my channel, you'll have a better chance of seeing those posts that gives you a preview of what we're doing. I was teasing you a little bit with the stretch image in the thumbnail because this is the stretched star block that we're making for the Little Bit Different Block of the Month program from True Blue Quilts. All the patterns are free. Check them out at truebluequilts.com. And where am I here? I need another. My pile of leader enders is getting a little small. I'll have to dig into my basket for some new color combinations. This was from obviously a red, white, and blue quilt, but I can't even remember what the original block was that I got these little bonus triangles from. So that's kind of funny. Okay, so I am just finishing up the last row of another stretched star with these lovely blue and yellow batiks. These are leftovers from my years as a Island Batik ambassador, the Island Batik Fabric Company. I was honored to be an ambassador for them for a couple years. They send you several shipments of fabric, and they have design challenges each month that you are in their program. And that was just a lot of fun. And I was very blessed to uh, to get so much fabric from them. So there are a lot of their new lines of fabric. So look for fabric companies towards the end of the year, October, November timeframe. They put out a call for submissions. It's a lot of fun being a brand ambassador for the fabric companies. But you can go back over the Island Batik playlist that I put on my channel. You can see my unboxing videos when I got new shipments and the different projects I made from those batik. I love batik fabric. So that is the stretch star block. So let's, excuse me for a minute. Hey, what's going on?
Hey, I'm at the mall.
Mm-hmm.
Looking for a skirt, and I also made a little bit of a poopsie mistake, and I forgot my socks, so I had to buy new ones.
Okay.
So just got charged to your card, but I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you.
There's a random charge from the Pilates place because of me.
I think I've had to buy 4 pairs already.
It was so embarrassing. I walked and I got off the report where I'm like, oh my god, my bare toes are out right now. I had to go run. And we had Chloe died of my class. Like, it was actually hard. She's like, this isn't a 1.5, this is a 1.7.
Mm-hmm.
It was so bad. Anyways, yeah, I just want to let you know that.
Okay. Have fun. Be safe.
I will. I love you.
Bye. My teenage daughter is off at the mall, so she had to check in. I apologize for that. She pops into every live at some point, and it's one of those things. Mom, I just have to tell you this real quick. But I do treasure that she's my only child, and she only has about a year left at home before she's off to college and adult adventures. So I don't mind the interruption. I hope you don't mind either. So we finished our stretch star block, and I want to show you the other color combinations that I picked out. These are all from my Island Batik scraps. So as I said, they are very generous to their brand ambassadors, and I am still sewing with those fabrics even after I am no longer part of the ambassador team. So I've got this beautiful navy watercolor. This is part of their foundations line. So you can find this fabric. It's still available. This was, I don't even remember, but like a farm type line. And it's just a fun plaid. So I think that will be a little bit different for the little bit different collection to have that plaid paired with that navy as a couple stars. And another lighter selection in that kind of watercolor print that they use for their foundations. And then these pretty polka dot kind of seed pod. I don't even know. There's just a few areas where there's smaller lines that give you that impression of kind of the dandelion that's gone to fluff, and you just have the tiny little stalks in between there in some of the spaces. So that will be another pairing of fabrics, and then another bright combination, that floral with that yellow mottled watercolor-ish print. So And if you've been around for any length of time, you know that I am a very lazy quilter when I sew from stash. And so these fabrics are all wrinkly because I just grabbed them out of the stash pile and started cutting. So I promise I do go iron when everything's done. But when I am on camera, I don't like hopping up and down to the ironing station, and it gets pretty hot if I just have the iron on all the time. So I try to limit the amount of time that I iron. Oh, Mama Hardin is saying that she never thought she'd have to use geometry. And I hear that a lot from quilters that they, oh my gosh, I hated math in high school. And here I am doing all these calculations now. So, but hopefully you trust in my math skills. I've written the directions out. You can find the measurements for all of the stretch star block at truebluequilts.com. So I hope to take some of that math stress away from you. So making our blocks, we need uphills and downhills. So I'm going to pair my fabrics up, yellow and blue, 2 of each, and cut my downhill line and my uphill line so that we can start making some more of these stretched star blocks. I'm going to get more of an assembly line going here. So we've got our color combinations, and I'm just making my different piles. I've pre-cut the background, the other squares I need for each star, and we'll start cooking with gas, as they say, when you speed up the process. Let's see, these are going to be my downhill line. And as I said, I planned this to be well oversized so that when we put our triangles together, we don't have anything to worry about. So I cut on the diagonal downhill line, and then I paired all my yellows and all my blues together so that those are ready to pair up and sew, making half rectangle units for our stretched star. And this one was problem with that wrinkled fabric is that it doesn't stack very well. So I need to be a little more careful with that. Being lazy tends to bite you, come back and bite you sometimes when you have to take extra time to get things lined up. Okay, so those are my downhill stacks of triangles, and now I can do my uphill stacks of triangles because you need 2 of each to make the final block. And when I say diagonal, I'm just cutting from corner to corner, and then I rotate the fabric around so that my triangles are all standing up the same way. Okay, have my triangles. I'm turning them the other half around so that I've got all my yellows together and all my blues. Do our last bit, and we're doing these uphill Got to talk to myself, get an expert guidance there. Okay. So we have our uphill pile and our downhill pile, and we are going to, like I said, rotate those all, and I'll show you in just a minute when I get them all stacked up, so that we have our rectangles together. And you don't want to flip things over. That'll get you confused. Make sure you're rotating those around to make the rectangle. And then when you pair them up to sew right sides together, you're sewing on that long diagonal edge. So get those in place. And you're looking for 2 mountain peaks. See how those triangles are offset when you sew? You do not want your triangles lined up. It will not open up to a rectangle. So we want our diagonals exactly lined up, and we want those offset mountain peaks. So I always tell people when we're sewing half rectangle triangles, look for the mountain peaks. Okay, so I've got a big pile that I can chain piece here together as I match those diagonals and look for my mountain peaks. I know I've got things lined up correctly. And I can sew, sew, sew. So I know when I am quilting from scrap, that it's very frustrating to get like 3 parts of the block cut out and then run out of fabric because the designer didn't give you an overall starting point. With this block, you need a 10-inch square of both colors, and you should have plenty to make the whole block. So I should add that to the pattern, that if you start with a 10-inch square and then cut all your units, you should be fine. But I've got my matched diagonals, I've got my mountain points, and I'm just going to sew and give my voice a break for a minute. Okay, matching up the diagonals on my half rectangle triangles. And just chain piecing here to make these extra blocks. We're here for until the top of the hour. So I usually have these live sew and chat events go for just a couple hours on the first Saturday of each month. Check in, show you a new block, and get some sewing done. And it will be time to load another quilt on the long arm this afternoon. I do long arm quilting for a few friends, and I've got a couple that's my friend is waiting for, so I need to get that done for her over the next couple weeks. Okay, so those were all the uphill triangles. So now I will take my pile of downhill triangles. Same thing, I want to rotate that yellow so that it makes the triangle with, or the complete rectangle with the blue. I don't want to flip it over, even though that would work with batiks. I don't want to get in that habit. I'm taking my triangle and I'm rotating it around to make the rectangle. And with printed fabric that had a definite wrong side and right side, this would be even more important. So I take my triangle stack, take the yellow pieces and rotate them around to face the blue. So I've got my complete rectangle here. Then I'm going to put right sides together, match up that diagonal, and look for the mountain peaks to show me that I have my pieces lined up correctly for sewing. And I'm just going to chain piece through this stack. This is kind of the boring part of the process, but I do enjoy the hum of that sewing machine. Make sure, since I dropped that one, that I definitely want to look for the mountain peaks on that one. let me know what project you're working on if you are not making the stretch star. I know it's quite a bit of back and forth to go from YouTube to the website to get the pattern instructions. So if you're saving that for later, I totally understand. I was working on a different block of the month program that my guild is using as a quilt along this year. And I cut everything out according to the directions and started sewing and got to the end and realized I'm several units short on the number of half square triangles that I made. So I have to go back and do more cutting before I can finish that project. Two more half rectangle triangle units to make. Well, for this set. It is pretty sad. Sometimes this is the only quilting sewing time that I have in the month. I was just thinking about the March block, the long dash block that I made, and I was really excited about the full quilt pattern, but I didn't get the blocks made to be able to put together the whole quilt layout, or I haven't gotten them made yet. I mean, they're always it's not like there's an expiration date on the fabric, so we'll get there eventually. But yeah, it's just this ends up being my only dedicated sewing time, and I just don't ever get as much done as I'd like to. Oh, fun! Bunny is making a toddler backpack. How cute! And then a baby quilt for her newborn niece. Well, congratulations on that growing family. It is so fun to welcome new little ones, especially when you have a chance to make them a quilt. That's wonderful. Okay, I've got all my half rectangle triangles. And so now that I have a good long chain, I'm going to go back to my blade saver. I need to get a resources page set up so that I can share links if anyone is looking for this little unit. I know Fat Quarter Shop has them if you tend to order your sewing supplies online, and I just find it really handy. Let me adjust the screen a little bit so you see more of my work table. It just sits in this, little caddy. My used rotary blade is in between those plastic, that little snowflake thing. This is a screw that holds it in place. And then it's just set up so that I can trim my chained pieced blocks there. And I have the stretch star finished block that I did earlier. And my little leader ender unit. I take my half square triangles the bonus triangles that I trim from binding, or if I'm doing flying geese or something like that, where you end up with leftover triangles. And to make a half square triangle, obviously you'd sew on that long diagonal, but I sew on one of the short legs so that I end up with hourglass units. This gives me a bigger unit than if I sewed on the diagonal and ended up with a half square triangle. Those would be like inch and a half units, and that's just a little too small. So this gives me a little over a 2-inch unit, which I just find a little more manageable with my scraps. So I've got a whole basket full of these guys that I need to do something with, but that is a problem for another day, as they say. So I'll keep those leader ender things, because now we are back to our trimming of half rectangle triangles. So first I'm going to press all the seams open. That just saves me a little bit of bulk when you've got those sharp corners on a half rectangle triangle. And I need to take some pictures of this cutting step to trim these, because these half rectangle units, half rectangle triangle HRTs, are very oversized. We're going to end up cutting almost half an inch off of both sides. So I definitely gave you lots of room for error, trial and error there, to cut these down to the appropriate side. And I need to take some pictures, because ruler placement, we're placing the dimensions of the ruler right on this diagonal seam line. So our ruler gets placed, and I'm looking at the dimensions of my unit and making sure that gets placed right on that diagonal of the block. And so then it gets a little wonky, a little off grain, it's not going to line up exactly, because of that placement of that diagonal needs to run, from the 2.5 to the 3.5 measurement. So I've detailed that process quite a bit verbally here on the live stream, and I just need to get some good overhead pictures so that you can see what I'm talking about. And actually putting some tape on your ruler will help. Now I am just finger pressing all of these seams open, because I don't want to go over to my iron. Do you have a small travel iron that you can use at your sewing, next to your sewing machine? I find that would be very handy on these days that I don't want to move across the room, just because the camera angle for the live is in the way of, right in the walkway between my sewing machine and my iron. I do have an ironing board set up 24/7. It very, very, very rarely gets clothes, a shirt or a pair of pants brought in here, much to my mother's chagrin, that I am more of a wash and wear type gal. I mean, she grew up in the days where you ironed your sheets and pillowcases, and who's got time for that? I very much like that sense of completion. And so I don't do a lot of chain piecing of multiple blocks very often because this is very tedious when you sew 16 units together and then have to go back and press 16 units and trim 16 units. One and done works a lot better for me, but takes a long time when you're doing one and done to get enough blocks together for a quilt. So um, if you like the sampler style of block of the month projects, but would rather have a finished project in just a few weeks rather than waiting around for the whole year, I am working on an option. So stay tuned, and I will be releasing more information about that over the next few weeks. It's a project for May, so save some time. I do appreciate everyone that is sewing along with the little bit different block of the month. The stretched star from April is available now on the True Blue Quilts website. And let me know what other quilting questions you have or block patterns that you'd like to see in a future video. I will add that to my list. I mentioned on the channel that last week I was going to a quilt show. So I still need to do my recap video from that experience. And yeah, such beautiful stuff. Do you have a quilt show in your local area? Have you ever entered? What, do you like to go get inspired? Yeah, a lot of times when you go and you see those award-winning quilts, I mean, the best in show winner, one of the top, I'd have to look back at the program, but the thread play, it was more of an art landscape quilt that looked like a photograph or an oil painting. You just cannot believe the amazing art that people can do with fabric and thread. It was just incredible. And I know I will never be that style of quilter. I'm much more the make a block, geometric versus landscape kind of patterns. But oh man, it was beautiful. Bunny is saying that the stretch star would make a great patriotic quilt for a veteran. And I totally agree, Bunny. Take a look at the clusters pattern that I released to go along with the stretch star. I do plan on making a patriotic version of that quilt. So watch for that coming up as well. It's one of those things. If I could just quilt 24 hours a day, I might make all the quilts that I have ideas for. But yes, I totally agree. This would be fun to do as a patriotic tribute to a veterans organization. Okay, so I've got all of my seams pressed open, and now I need to, like I said, I'm lining up my ruler so that it hits, and that diagonal seam in the block goes to the corner of the block measure, the unit measurements that I need. So I need to stop talking and pay attention. I'm just using my finger on the place on the ruler where I need to measure. I'm putting my thumb right on that measurement. If you have washi tape or painter's tape or something, you would want to mark your ruler like that. And as I said, I will take some overhead pictures and put those online so that you see exactly what I'm talking about when I say that you need to trim a little bit off grain line for these units. Remember what measurement I'm using. Make sure that diagonal line goes straight through the corners. And set that aside. Oh, my stomach is growling. It's almost time for lunch. I didn't have a very big breakfast this morning, so that makes it even worse. Okay, I've got a big pile of triangles to trim. So we'll just be doing that for a while as we hang out together for a little while longer. I was in a trimming discussion with a friend of mine, and some of these things are so funny to do on through text or email. And at one point they just said, why is this seeming so backwards? And then we realized that we actually were talking about the process and we did things the same way. It just came out different when we were trying to type in the words versus just, how do you line up a ruler? Do you count from the right edge or the left edge? It got to be kind of funny. Okay, so I need that dot right on the line in that dot. So I'm sorry if you have put on the YouTube live stream expecting some chatter to keep you company as you sew, because I tend to go silent, especially when I am thinking about how to line up this ruler for my half rectangle triangles, HRTs. And I had shied away from any other method just because I couldn't wrap my brain around it since I learned how to cut HRTs with templates first. The online instructions just seemed really confusing. But now that I've got it down, in my head and what to look for on any ruler, I am excited about the possibilities. Whoops, I was lining up my colors and I got things in the wrong stack. So I will put that dot on the line and that dot on the line. And then we trim. And this piece really shows you how wonky our cut is. Look at how narrow the piece is at the top versus the bottom. So we are off grain with our trimming just that little bit from that short end to that wide end. So I don't think it makes a difference. Once this block might be a little bit off grain, but once it is put with other pieces that are cut straight of grain, I don't think you'll have any problems. So I was never a garment sewer, so I don't worry about grain. I just cut. People that fussy cut, they're not worried about the grain of the fabric. So I think we'll be fine. If anybody is worried about making these half rectangle triangle units that are off grain, it's just fabric. Make sure I've got things lined up. When I cut sitting down, sometimes my rotary cutter doesn't line up correctly. So So let me know if you've had any experience with half rectangle triangles before, and if my explanation makes sense. Obviously, the other way to do this would be to paper piece. You can draw out a rectangle, add the seam allowance, and just paper piece along those if you are not comfortable with the instructions that I've given for cutting the fabric into triangles and sewing it that way. I should probably save a couple of these units to take pictures after I go off camera so that I have that tutorial ready for everyone. Yes, Mama Harden, I love to make patriotic quilts. Anytime I am doing a like a test block or something like that, I do tend to choose patriotic colors so that I can donate the quilt eventually to our very deserving veterans. And although lately I'm making some smaller size quilts, so I'm doing those in more kid friendly fabric, so I can donate. Project Linus is a good children's quilt charity. Yes, Bunny, there are, with everything, there are lots of ways to accomplish a half rectangle triangle unit. You commented that mine has less waste. I don't know about that. I feel like I'm wasting a lot of fabric because I did give you such oversized fabric squares to start with. But the good thing about fabric is there's always more. The companies just keep rolling it out for us. So and I'm concentrating to make sure I've got the correct measurements for my next unit. Okay, looking at this block, this unit, my diagonal didn't hit exactly in the corner. So when we're pointing out mistakes, that one didn't. This one got pretty close. This one hit almost exactly there in the corner. But when you stand back, people aren't looking at that error. I mean, obviously now you are because I'm pointing it out, but do we have any errors here? Doesn't look like it until you get way up close and you can see that a couple places my diagonal did not hit exactly in the corner. But, you know, you work to be as exact as you can. And the beauty of quilting is that you still end up with something that provides warmth and can function as a blanket. So let's not point out errors to people. Let's just admire the lovely overall useful effect of our quilting. So I'm making stretched stars for April. The block pattern is free. I do have a new quilt design for sale. If you are so inclined, you can purchase that at a discount during the month of April. And if things don't look right, double check your measurements because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my corners are way off. And well, it was because I had the ruler lined up in the wrong place. So mistakes will happen. So much cutting. As I said, I was going to set aside several of those to take pictures later. So I have a few. It doesn't look like I'm going to get any more blocks sewn. But I appreciate everyone joining us for our sew and chat on the first Saturday of the month. We set aside some time to just get together, and it's working out as a wonderful time to debut the block of the month for my little bit different sampler quilt. So as I said, I have some exciting things coming up. If you don't, if you want to get a quilt done faster than a full year for the block of the month program. So we are working in 2023 with this 6x9 block size. That's a little bit different than your traditional quilt. So I hope you sew along. Send me pictures of your stretched stars as you get those done. I'd love to see your fabric combinations. And yes, Mama Hardin and I will be putting together some patriotic versions too, because yes, all these star quilt blocks make wonderful patriotic quilts. So yes, that's a great idea. And I'm going to trim a few more blocks here, and then I will go on about my day. Exciting Final Four basketball happening. So that will be on the TV here this afternoon. As I said, I have another quilt to load on the long arm. Nothing too exciting. The customer just wants some nice meandering. So that will be fun to work on while we've got basketball on the television. And it is baseball season again here in the US. So depending on what sports you like to watch, you've got quite a few options. I just noticed a little tuft of batting on my fabric because I actually used this fabric as the pieced backing. And then I just, when I trimmed the quilt, the finished quilt down, I just threw the scraps in my bin. And there was a little tuft of batting left on that fabric. So I knew it had come from a backing at some point. Okay, any last minute questions or comments? Drop them in the chat. We're about to say goodbye for the April edition of Sew and Chat. I want to thank everyone for hanging out here, and I will look forward to the month of May when we will be back here live. Of course, you'll see some videos from me in the weeks in between. Always cooking up new and fun stuff for my True Blue crew. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. You can find the pattern for the stretched star at truebluequilts.com, and the little bit different block of the month program. This is the fourth block that we're making 6x9. You can go find January, February, and March all online as well. If you have any questions for me, feel free to ask. I'm happy to help give you guidance from my experience, provide some resources as we all enjoy, experiment, and excel as we create. Bunny, thanks for joining in from Oregon, and have a wonderful day. I'm going to sign off, folks, and I will see you soon. Happy quilting.